Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again, and among the articles and essays I read in the month of August, the one that struck me the most, that interested me the most, was a piece on the Paris Review by a guy called Adam O'Fallon Price. Yes, that's his name, where he discussed all the books he is not going to read, which is actually a great topic. The article is so open and honest about the fact that at a certain point in your life as a reader, you realize that, yeah, you're not going to read all the books that were ever published, and even some major masterpieces and some works of classic literature. Let's face it, you are not going to read that one book. That one book is Infinite Jest for Adam. In my case, the book I'm not going to read, I think it's Finnegans Wake. I realized that in a previous video I mentioned the fact that at the beginning of every year I try to read Finnegans Wake, and I go as far as maybe a paragraph, maybe a page, but then I stop because I don't get anything about it. And so many of you guys have been recommending supporting material and guides to the novel and ways to approach the novel. But then I read one of the most beautiful essays Michael Chabon has written on his passion for Joyce and his reading of Finnegans Wake, and I realized something. I realized that Chabon is a big Joyce fan, and he had a hard time with Finnegans Wake. Who ever had an easy time with Finnegans Wake? But he read it because he was passionate about the author. He loved Dubliners, Portrait of the Artist, Ulysses. At a certain point he just had to read Finnegans Wake because he was so interested in it. Me? I don't think I am. I don't think I am that much of a Joycean. I love Dubliners, especially The Dead. It was one of those writings that when I was an adolescent, it showed me how powerful literature can be and how great it can be. Portrait of the Artist, I'm a little bit on the fence. I'm still not sure whether it's a minor work or whether the problem is me and I didn't fully get it. Ulysses, I couldn't appreciate it to the fullest extent, and there I'm very positive the problem is me. I'm not the right type of reader probably, and it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't for me to read Finnegans Wake. I think it's I think of it this way. Guys like Michael Chabon who want to read Finnegans Wake and do are like people who want to go to a secret club in a seedy, slightly dangerous part of town because they know the town well, they like to go clubbing and they want to experience the town to the fullest. Me, I'm more like a tourist who believes he knows nightclubs and wants to go there because he's heard about it, but if I do go there I'll probably just get mugged and I'll have my kidneys stolen. Speaking of Ulysses, another category Adam discusses, Adam O'Fallon Price, I don't know why I mention him like I know him, the guy mentions in the article is books that he did read, but he did so at a time where maybe he was too young and didn't fully get them. That's the case with Ulysses, I think, and also with Mrs. Dalloway. Those books, I probably read them with the wrong mindset. I retained very little of the reading experience, which did happen with other novels, make no mistake. I realized that even my reading of Middlemarch by George Eliot, I loved the novel, but I retained only a few reflections and only some characters, and definitely I would say not more than 50% of the book. But when it comes to Middlemarch, I fully plan to reread that novel because I did appreciate it, and I'm sure that if I can read it, giving it the time it deserves, I could have a hell of a great time with it. Mrs. Dalloway, Ulysses, not so certain. In general, modernism, it's kinda rare that it's my cup of tea. But I will add something else. I like this idea, I like the honesty of telling to yourself that, yeah, there are certain books you are never going to read. But that happened to me in the past and I already kinda changed my mind. In a previous video I mentioned how I'm never going to read The Pale King by David Foster Wallace because beyond Infinite Jest I'm not that much of a fan of Wallace's fiction because I know the idea behind the novel and I do not find it fascinating at all. But at the same time, sometimes I think of The Pale King and I'm like, well, I might just read it just to see what the fuss is about. So really, you never know. Up to a point, yeah, you never know. But what about you guys? are there books that you are certain, you are positive you are not going to read, and why is that? Do you think the whole idea is flawed? Do you think that you should never admit to yourself that you're not going to read certain books, that you should always keep an open mind and always entertain the possibility and challenge yourself as a reader? Let me know in the comments below. Two other articles, shorter and lighter, I'm going to mention. The first one is a review by Ben Dolnick for the New York Times of one of the best novels of all times, Karel Capek's War with Newts, a science fiction novel that, as Dolnick says, deserves to be as widely read and as recognized as a 1984, Brave New World, such masterpieces of science fiction. It is truly so amazing, it has such a compelling plot, and it shows you in such great detail the way the most dreadful historical tragedies can be precipitated by the most common base impulses to be found in people. That's just heartbreaking. I couldn't recommend it highly enough, and Dolnick is as much of a fan as me, if not more. Finally, this week I found Tim Jacobus' new website and a series of interviews with the guy. For those of you who don't know him, Tim Jacobus is the illustrator of R.L. Stine's original Goosebumps series. These masterpieces, I was obsessed with them as a kid, I'm still obsessed with them as a sort of adult, and I do firmly believe 100% that so much of the series' success is owed to Jacobus' illustrations. The covers were just so good, you just had to collect these things because the covers were so interesting. I'm going to post links in the description box to some interviews with the guy where he describes his creative process, the story of his collaboration with Scholastic and R.L. Stine, and he discusses some of his favorite covers from the series. If, like me, you were a Goosebumps fan or still are, you can't miss these articles. He's a great guy. Thank you as always for watching, guys, and let me know what were these stories and the essays and articles from the global sphere of literature that interested you the most in the month of August. And I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.